Welcome to Faithfully Memphis. My name is Maggie Schaumleffel. I'm the communication coordinator for St. George's Episcopal Church in Germantown, Tennessee. Every Thursday at 8 a.m., this show focuses on conversations with interesting people to learn about the role that faith plays in their lives. We are broadcast from WYXR 91.7 FM in Memphis, Tennessee. Today's show was appropriately given the title of Love Heals, as we will be hearing from two Memphis locals actively serving the Episcopal Recovery ministries in our Diocese of West Tennessee. I'm excited anytime I get to talk to or hear the words of either of these two people. So I warmly welcome Shannon Tucker and Laura White to Faithfully Memphis. Thank you both for being here and sharing this time with me today. Thanks, guys. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, Maggie.
Thanks, Maggie.
Since we will be talking about addictions, coping mechanisms, and mental health today, we'll start with the message from the Episcopal Church, and that is, the Episcopal Church welcomes you. If you believe you might have a problem or a loved one who is struggling, please find a congregation near you. You can call any one of those churches and find out if there's a 12-step group that meets there. There probably is. Also, the Episcopal Recovery Ministry has a complete list of 12-step groups for people struggling with addiction and those who love them. That's at www.episcopalrecovery.org. And if you believe you or a loved one needs help, please do not hesitate to call the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They have a 24/7 hotline for treatment and referral, and that is 1-800-662-HELP. So the podcast, Faithfully Memphis, normally begins with a segment called Saint of the Day. And I've gone through a little bit of a personal evolution when I was thinking about this segment, y'all. And that's to say I had perfectly orchestrated notes and I knew exactly what I was going to say, and I changed it in the middle of the night last night. Thank you, Emily Austin, Minister of Communication, for your patience. What I realized is that originally when I wanted to talk about the Saint of the Day, to kind of tell you backwards, I had an agenda. I realized I was trying to accomplish something by discussing what Christianity is and how I define Christianity and how I feel that right now and probably throughout history, some people have used the name Christian or the term Christianity to defend campaigns that I think are separating, and they spread possibly fear and hate and excommunication, and it breaks my heart and I get angry. I mean, I start to clench my fists and I get tears in my eyes and I feel something in my throat. And I was just so sure that, yeah, this is going to be moving, because I had looked at, as is recommended, I had gone and looked at who the Episcopal Church recognizes on April 7th. It means, an individual who probably, who did die on April 7th, who had important impact on the world. And the man listed is a man, Tikhon, and I read about him. I was like, yeah, okay, it's not really exciting. Like, I wanted something with impact. And so it goes, come into Maggie's agenda, which was defending Christianity and my righteous definition of what it meant to be a follower of Jesus. And I realized I was feeling all these really strong emotions. And for me, and in my recovery work, when I know I'm feeling all these really strong emotions, I say, okay, you got to slow down, girl. Figure out what's going on. So I did some journaling and I did some meditation, which are my forms of prayer and some of my forms of prayer. And I could feel that I was judging. And in my recovery, I say, if I'm judging others, I'm judging them for being judgmental. And you spot it, you got it. So I think I need to defend God from this. From this, and really I just need to realize I'm not God. So I pull out the book, start reading about Tikhon again. And as I'm getting quiet and trying to quiet Maggie and to relinquish control over what I want this message to be, I see this man in a new light. And one of the first things I saw was a picture, and it's a picture of a whole bunch of bishops at a consecration of an Anglican bishop. And when I say it's a whole bunch of bishops at a consecration of an Anglican bishop, what you probably think the image is a whole bunch of Anglican bishops. But it's not. It has some Anglican bishops in the picture. It's the consecration of Reginald Heber Weller. But in that picture is a bishop of the Russian Orthodox Church and a bishop of the Polish National Catholic Church. And they were there at the consecration. And this, ecumenical consecration was in 1898 in Wisconsin. And I marveled at, I tried to think about the small quiet spaces and the conversations that might have happened between these men of religion with very different foundational dogma within their church. I mean, the Russian Orthodox Church and the Anglican Church sitting and communing together. So I was really interested in that. And they even, at the time, this consecration was referred to as a circus. And I thought, I'm sure there was a whole bunch of hubbub and scandal, and I can't believe all this is happening. But again, I was thinking about that quiet space, probably, that these gentlemen had in their devotion to God. And then further reading in the life of Tikhon, when he's a bishop, he is a bishop in Alaska, a bishop in New York, and then he moves back to Russia. 10 years after moving back to Russia, he is appointed the patriarch, which is like we have the archbishop. No, we don't. Sorry. We have the presiding bishop here in the United States. And Tikhon was appointed the patriarch in Russia. And what's really important is that he was given this election. He was elected on June 21st in 1917, which is during the Russian Revolution. So when he is named the figurehead of this organization, is probably the one time in history that nobody would want to be named a figurehead of this organization. And to read about him and his statements in regards to the Bolsheviks, in regards to the atrocities of war, and he basically didn't make anybody happy. Of course, the Soviets wanted him quieted and wanted the church quieted, and the people of his own church were dismayed with his lack of his lack of strength and standing up to right and wrong. He was imprisoned in a monastery, and he lived and guided his people through famine and under great extreme pressure from all sides. And what I loved were seeing his words that he is quoted as saying, "May God teach every one of us to strive for his truth and for the good of the Holy Church, rather than something for our sake." And I felt a kinship to this man who was the bishop of the Russian Orthodox Church during the Russian Revolution, that he quieted himself down and tried to get himself out of the way of all of the hubbub and the terrible atrocities that were happening around him, and tried to focus on God. And so I appreciated that. And I appreciated being able to move through that, and I believe be guided through that. And it just reminds me of a lot of my process that I do with recovery and just trying to be a better human and a better Christian in general. So that is our saint of the day, Tikhon. And I'd like to end this segment with a prayer. And Laura, do you mind introducing this prayer, giving us a little bit of background, and leading us in this prayer, please?
So I'm going to read a prayer from the 1979 prayer book, and this was a daily reading that I did when living with active addiction. It really centered me, it grounded me, it gave me hope, and I'll read that for you now. O blessed Lord, you ministered to all who came to you. Look with compassion upon all who through addiction have lost their health and freedom. Restore to them the assurance of your unfailing mercy. Remove from them the fears that beset them. Strengthen them in the work of their recovery, and to those who care for them, give patient understanding and persevering love. Amen.
Amen.
One of the things about that prayer that I found when I was reading it, I was thinking of my loved ones who were struggling. And it wasn't until I, maybe read it for the 50th time that I realized that those who care for them, that I was included in that prayer as well. It just gave me a great deal of comfort.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we will jump into our discussion, and because y'all are both so familiar with the recovery ministries of the Episcopal Church, I pulled up what their mission statement is on their website, and it reads this: the goal of recovery ministries of the Episcopal Church is to renew and revitalize the Church's capability to recognize and address the serious social ills surrounding the pathological use of alcohol, drugs, and other addictive behaviors, gambling, overeating, sex, etc., and suggest an appropriate Christian response. And there it ends. And when I read that, I think about the complexity of addressing addiction within a church. And in the past, or maybe even today, addiction has had a reputation of being very easily associated with sin or being bad. I know there are some groups who might say that you're just not being a good enough Christian if you have these struggles. So, Shannon, I'd like to ask you, what is the appropriate Christian response to addiction, and how does the Episcopal Recovery Ministry work toward that response?
Love. So, Maggie, I would say patient, understanding, and persevering love, as the prayer that Laura just read says. The Episcopal Church has a long history of addressing addiction. In 1979, the Episcopal Church was one of the first churches to actually address addiction head-on. They created a coalition called the National Episcopal Coalition on Alcohol. It's an organization that is recovery ministries of the Episcopal Church today. But they put money into that organization and studied alcohol and the effects of alcohol. The organization learned pretty quickly that it wasn't just alcohol, so it became the National Episcopal Coalition on Alcohol and Drugs. And then 10 years later, they realized, there are other things than drugs and alcohol that are affecting us. And they created recovery ministries of the Episcopal Church, encompassing all of the addictions that you're talking about. But to me, the appropriate response is always love. When I first got into recovery myself, my sister was a member of a church here in Memphis, an Episcopal church here in Memphis, and when she found out that I needed help, the first place she went was the church, and the church helped her figure out what to do next. It was a pivotal moment in my recovery, very beginning of my recovery, and having someone from the church tell my sister, you need to go talk to him and tell him what you know, and ask him if he wants to get help. And since then, since that 18 years ago, the church has played a huge role in my own recovery and the recovery of a bunch of people that I know. So I'm grateful that the response from our church was at the time and still is love.
Love. And it's interesting, too, that you said they actually studied the effects of alcohol and drugs on the human body and what it means to have an addiction, that if you're looking at it scientifically and factually and realistically, it's not something that we can just pray away. Well, I don't know, Laura, what do you...
Well, that's an excellent point. I think one of the things you need to remember is addiction is a disease, like other diseases that we struggle with, and it affects the brain. And when the brain is affected, it affects sort of all aspects of life. So, and recovery needs to take the healing the brain into consideration, but because of the impact of the disease and the chaos and the turmoil that it creates, the recovery has to include not only the kind of the scientific medical aspect of it, but also there's a spiritual piece to it. And for me, that is what I have really found grace and mercy in being able to blend the science of recovery with the spiritual aspect of recovery. And that, for me, is what the Recovery Commission does. It's a place to go where you can find comfort and solace and support and love.
And what we know is that I've seen before in text, it's a triangle. Like there's a connection between mental, physical, emotional, more than a triangle, and spiritual well-being. Like they are, we can't parse it out really even,
No, and it isn't necessarily helpful to just do one piece of it. I think again, living more comfortably in the world is a challenge, and being able to take care of the whole person, and finding a place where you are non-judgmentally accepted. And again, I think that was one of the things that I experienced as well in coming to the church and the struggles with addiction, when I realized I was overwhelmed and unable to cope, where the church is where I went as well, and I was welcomed with open arms and support and love and prayers and solutions, I suppose, in that the liturgy offers us so many great places of comfort, and turning to that on a daily basis brought a great deal of comfort, a great deal of love, remembering that addiction causes shame and fear, and I think the church can be an antidote to that. It's like it's okay to be human. We are not perfect. And you are loved. You are wholly loved. And God's message to us through the church can really be the framework for recovery.
And the Episcopal Church's relationship, Shannon, as you were saying, with that message and trying to convey that message is also that it's not like you have to be a Christian you say it better. Say it how that your faith, it's not faith dependent or faith denomination.
It's certainly not specifically. So lots of people, when they get to recovery, have a relationship with the church or with God in general that is not a particularly happy one or comfortable one. They didn't feel loved a lot of times when they get to recovery. And in the Episcopal Church, it is such a blessing to me first I'll tell you that I didn't grow up with a God that I was afraid of, and I'm grateful for that. And when I got into recovery, it wasn't hard for me to say, oh, I remember I loved the Episcopal Church most of my life, and I just hadn't been in a while. And I remember walking into a church, and because I'm a little bit self-centered, I thought that the people in the church were going to come up to me and say, oh, who are you? You're brand new here, aren't you? We're so glad to have you. And they won't like that I said this, but nobody did the first 3 weeks that I came to church. And I thought, why aren't they talking to me? And then the fourth week I thought, oh, there's this thing called a visitor card in the pew back in front of me. And I filled it out, and they had a box that said recovery on it. And I checked it, and somebody called me the next Monday. And they connected me with people within the church that were in recovery, that supported me and helped guide me on a path. And amazing. But I had to reach out. I had to actually take a step forward. It's the same way we have to do in recovery too. I have to do some footwork in recovery.
And understanding our narrative and the narratives of other people. So I grew up in the Episcopal Church. We're being really Episcopal Church heavy here, but I think it's because we've got 3 Episcopalians in a room, and it's our personal experience. But for me, especially at this time of Lenten, the Lenten season, I loved Lent. I loved Lent because it was a time for me to be able to say, I'm sorry that I make mistakes all the time. That's where I came from with it. And I liked a lot of the liturgy of the Episcopal Church because I knew the rules. I knew when I was supposed to sit, I knew when I was supposed to stand, I knew when I was supposed to kneel, and I knew how to do it, and I could do it. And then breaking that apart and breaking it open, and it's been through my process of recovery when I see that Lent is not about me walking around being sorry and feeling bad about myself. It's about my relationship with my higher power and the beautiful, humble peace that I can gain from knowing that I am not God, and returning me to that. And I think, especially at this time, during a pandemic, when we see the world, we joke about it a lot. We're like, okay, we make a plan. What's plan B and plan C? Because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't have the lack of, or the recognition of the lack of control that we actually have. And I'm thinking about, Laura, like a lot of times, and for me and for a lot of people, like it is that I don't know what the rules are. And our human lament is coming to the surface of, we have so much to grieve. We do have so much to grieve, and the pain and the trouble. And if we don't have a place, we don't know what to do with it. Number one, we don't even know we're feeling it or experiencing it. Then problems arise.
Well, I think there is this collective grief, and grief is a universal experience, one that we all encounter when you have loved. You will experience grief, but really being able to recognize what that is, taking a pause, and being able to reflect for a moment what's causing that pain, having that awareness, that understanding of discomfort. And then the other piece is just hanging in there with it. A feeling typically lasts about 90 seconds. If you can just hang in there for 90 seconds and maybe just feel the feeling, really is okay. It is okay. We are complicated, wonderful beings, and we have the capacity to experience life in lots of different ways, but from a feeling space, if you allow yourself to have that feeling. For many people, it can seem so overwhelming and not knowing what to do with it. I better just get away from it. But if you recognize what you can learn, what it's teaching you, and that it dissipates, it does get better.
I've never heard that before, Laura, that a feeling lasts about 90 seconds. That's an amazing piece of advice. The hardest thing for me sometimes when I'm having a feeling is just to remember to breathe. Like, we as a people hold our breath a lot. I notice it, and when I actually stop, when I put my focus on, take a deep breath, Shannon, and allow the silence to be there. And if we weren't on a radio show where I'm supposed to talk, I would take a whole minute and tell you, take a deep breath. And that does wonderful things for feelings for me, and it helps me not want to just go change them immediately. The feeling itself can come back, and I have to take another breath, and another breath, and another breath.
And it's an opportunity. In my house, we use the phrase, you got to go through the tunnel. So we're feeling this feeling. You're going to come out on the other side, and there's like you said, Laura, there's no bad feelings. And I remember when I first went to a dear friend and I told her, I'm so angry, I'm feeling all these feelings, and she said, they're not going to kill you. They're feelings. You can be with them. But to think too, like how and it's a good time to be curious. Why am I feeling this feeling? And it'll help us explore instead of it's a lot of my knee-jerk and my muscle memory reactions are to, how can I stop this feeling? Where can I stop this feeling? Does it mean I want to pull up Pinterest and escape on Pinterest? Or does it mean I want to, call a friend? Or does it mean I want to go eat some cookies? Like what, and those, and not that any of these things are terrible things, right? And they can be. And how do I know? How do I know, Laura? Like, we've got these coping mechanisms and skills. Help us see the difference.
Well, I think it's about balance. I think all of us, have our go-to things that relieve the pain or the fear, the frustration, the anxiety, whatever it is we're experiencing at the moment. And I think it's, at the point of which you are, whatever you're going to is causing you issues in your daily functioning. If it's impairing your ability to live your life as you want to live it, is when your coping skills perhaps are detrimental to you. So, being able to, and it's not always easy to recognize those warning signs. It's sometimes it's helpful to ask for feedback from the people who live with you because they see you the best, or the people close in your life who can give you, an honest opinion of your coping skills. But, I think for me, it's being able to, recognize my own warning signs, being able to understand what those are, feeling exhausted, feeling worn out, pushing myself or engaging in too many activities rather than sitting still. You know, one of the gifts for me of the last couple of years is being able to slow down and enjoy life or see life from a different perspective. You know, but figuring out what's a healthy coping skill and what's an unhealthy coping skill. And I think an unhealthy coping skill is one that's creating more problems in your life than benefit.
I think about the HALT. Don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, right? And the things we do. And also how, and I think a lot of people would say that maybe this silver lining or part of a blessing that we've received is being able to explore what our boundaries really are. Like, what is the life that we want when we're forced to stop, then to think about how we rebuild our lives, what our boundaries, what we want them to be, and when we know it feels off or we need to intervene and detect a difference.
In being able to, you know, I think the other part that has been created is, you know, this prolonged uncertainty of being able to kind of stay present and grounded with with not knowing what's going to happen next. And I think, again, you know, using those tools of recovery, you know, recognizing so much of what that is, you know, is letting go, letting God, being able to be present in the moment, being okay with what's right now, right here, and not being too concerned with what's down the road. And I mean, that takes practice, that takes mental practice. I mean, the other cool thing about our brains, they're highly complicated, but they are malleable. We have the ability to, with neuroplasticity, we have the ability to change our brains. And you can change your brain by the way you think about something. It is super cool. And prayer is a beautiful way to introduce new neural pathways.
That gives me so much optimism and hope. Whenever somebody says that, I love being reminded that I can change. I can change. I may not be happy with the behaviors that I have right now, and I can change them, and that I have the support to do so. And I think too about my family, and with, you know, having the beautiful responsibility of having children and having and helping them grow, and especially when your world is smaller, things are bigger. And so I, as an adult, can say, okay, I know I can get through the tunnel. There will be another side to this tunnel, with it be it emotion or be whatever it is that's going on around me. And that is because I work my program of trying to say I can get through the other side of this tunnel, and from experience and being able to see that it has happened before, so I can have faith that it'll happen again. But in talking to and with a family and trying to guide children through this, do you have recommendations on how to do that?
Well, I think you brought up a great point. I love that line of, you know, when you're small, the world is so big. And, you know, a piece of it I think we forget as adults, we've done this before. We've had some experience. You know, when you're, you know, 5, 6, 15, it's the first time this has happened. And the first time anything happens, it's hard. That's just really how life goes. And so recognizing that. But I think the other piece too is, you know, grounding children in a sense of faith, love, and acceptance also gives them a place to go when things are, you know, is a tool that you can give them that gives them hope and gives them comfort. I think being able to recognize when they are needing some assistance. I think the other piece too is listening to them. You know, the other thing that's beautiful is the first time that you experience something, you typically are pretty honest about it. And being able to, and creating a space where they can be honest with their fears and feelings. But also giving them, you know, breathing is as Shannon, you were describing, you know, is a very powerful tool. What it does is it soothes our parasympathetic nervous system. I mean, it physiologically makes it better. It does. I mean, there's research that says that. So teaching kids to belly breathe. You know, I've heard a parent talk about it as a dragon breath. to use the dragon breath, depending again on the age of the kid is how you frame it.
Break that down for us. Belly breathing and dragon breath.
Belly breathing and dragon breath. And it's good for grown-ups too, really.
I would say that's why Laura came along, so she could say words like parasympathetic, and I would go, that sounds fantastic. For me, having a spiritual practice, specifically during the pandemic, and what does that mean, having a spiritual practice? Well, sometimes that can sound scary, like, oh, I have to go into a quiet room that has an altar and sit cross-legged and om for an hour. For me, it can mean taking 10 good breaths, just sitting quietly, and for me, I count them, and usually when I get to 4, my brain goes somewhere else, and then I come back, I'm like, oh, what number am I on? And I just start at the next number I remember. But a spiritual practice can be something really simple. I draw labyrinths with a pen on a sticky note just about every day of my life, and it connects me. I learned it actually through an Episcopal friend who is a big studier of the labyrinth, and the labyrinth is a meditation tool. There are several labyrinths in Memphis that you can go walk, actual on the ground labyrinths or canvas labyrinths. But having some kind of spiritual practice, like just a daily something that I'm doing to connect with my higher power, helps ground me. And we've talked about several times, like breathing is a big part of that whole practice.
I have a mantra, breathe on me, breath of God. It helps me to remember and to fill myself with the breath of God and to feel the breath of God. And I do it through a series of different types of breathing and changing the phrasing as well. Do y'all have any mantras or?
Well, I have a few things that I call them. I call them God moments. And it's similar to what Shannon does is I have a daily practice. And it starts with walking in my yard in the beginning of the morning and, heading out with the dog. And I sort of watched her initially because she's very excited to smell and see what happened overnight. And so if I, again, give myself the opportunity to pause and to just notice now the buds coming out on the leaves and how interesting they look when they first emerge. And so then what I've turned that into is I took this from somebody, I don't remember where I read it, as moments of awe, A-W-E. As you stand there and observe that, again, I'm thinking about creating that muscle memory of peace, that muscle memory of calm and awe, like just taking in whatever it is that I am observing that particular morning on my walk.
And I'll say, if you're standing and intent on peace and awe, then it's very difficult for shame and fear to coexist in that space, right?
That's a great point, right. I mean, it isn't as if shame and fear don't show up sometimes, but, to be able to have another tool to go to counteract it with. And I think that's the piece too, kind of circling back to your question about what do we teach kids? How do we help children deal with these big feelings and the scariness that happens in the world, is giving them a place of refuge, giving them a place to go when they're feeling overwhelmed, where they can get some comfort.
And words too, right? Like
words.
I try to say, and I'll even try to model that. Okay, right now I'm feeling shame. And when I feel shame, I feel it in my fingertips. They feel fuzzy and weird, and my head feels really big. And I talk about how I physically feel so that next time my fingertips feel, fuzzy and my head feels really big, then maybe I'll say, oh, I'm feeling shame. That's what I'm feeling. That's what's happening right now.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And to share that with your kids. I mean, to share that so that they can, because they have the same physiological responses. I remember, and Shannon and I had this conversation a little bit ago, when my son was little, trying to decide which Beanie Baby to get between the bunny and the lizard, I think. And we spent a lot of time deliberating which one, pros and cons. So we walked out of the store with the lizard, but then we got just halfway down the block. He stopped in his tracks and said, "Mommy, I've got a funny feeling." And so we processed that, and that funny feeling is second guessing. That's regret. We processed it, and we went back and got the bunny.
Oh, I love that he was able to voice that to you.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And it's those moments where when my children can say, "I'm mad at you."
Right.
And I feel so honored by that trust and being able to communicate.
Yes.
This is what I'm feeling, because I look around at the humanity and the human beings and at my personal experience, and I think there may be a day when my children are facing issues of coping mechanisms and or addiction or substance use. And if they know that they can tell me what they're feeling, or if they know that they can tell somebody that it's okay to say, I'm feeling these really strong, weird feelings, and that's just part of the process. And I hold hope in that.
Right. Again, it's, it's kind of giving them the tools and the space to know where to go when things are not feeling okay.
Something that just came up for me is, talking about emotions, talking about coping and ways to take that breath and try to focus on higher power. What about talking about addiction? With our peers, with other adults, with other Christians in the church? I mean, I know this is a huge question, and with families. I mean, what do y'all got to say about that?
So, I'm 53 years old. So, growing up, we didn't really talk about addiction. It's not something that it was something that was quiet. You talked about somebody else having addiction, but you didn't talk about even what addiction or alcoholism meant. And today, because we are much more open about recovery, about recovering from addiction, even within the church, I think about young people that I know today that know me and know that I don't drink and know that I'm in recovery, and how different that is today than it used to be. The ability to just be open about the subject of addiction, having this kind of conversation right here, talking about it, hugely helpful.
Can normalize that it is as part of the human condition, right?
Right, and it's a disease. I mean, I learned that and didn't know that until I came here, but that addiction is actually a disease, a medical condition, and it was so helpful to me to go, oh, I'm not just bad. There's nothing wrong with me. That I'm going to be okay if I can just get the help that I need.
And your willingness to engage in that help. I think the other piece that it's helpful to remember is the addiction is a disease, and that recovery is possible, and that recovery is beautiful. I think being able to dispel myths, to dispel, and just to be able to have open, honest conversations about it. And for me, part of it is really to let go of my shame and my fear. And addiction is really an isolating illness, because it affects the brain in the way it does, and then it affects all the people that come into contact with it. And addiction is an illness, and it causes illness. It causes illness in the people that come into contact with it. So being able to understand that gives you an opportunity to do something with it. And again, the gift of recovery is being able to kind of put down that shame and practice with acceptance, with compassion, and with love.
It's like a compounding disease. If you are experiencing the disease of addiction, then you want to isolate and cover your shame. So therefore, it's just a continuing cycle of you need to be in shame, you need to feel isolated because you don't want anybody to know. In recent history, had the experience where a dear friend died in relation to addiction, and our priest, Mother Dorothy, said, "We're going to call it what it was. If this person had died of another disease, if this person, God forbid, had died of cancer, we would say they died of cancer. We're going to call this what it is." And that is so freeing. And at the same time, what I saw was people saying, just our response of, "Oh, I had no idea." And I think about, especially this time where we, do feel physically isolated from other human beings, and what we know about having a satisfactory and fulfilling life as a human being is we need to feel connected. And it's ironic that the thing that is impeding so much of our health, mental, physical and emotional health, is we want to isolate. All we want to do in that moment is isolate. So,
and how easy was it to isolate during the pandemic? If you're in recovery, they canceled many recovery meetings. And so you're thinking, how are we going to do this? And thank goodness we have technology today that was able to give us Zoom recovery meetings that we never would have thought of that But the ability to connect with each other over that technology, to still be able to have those relationships. I can tell you that coming back to 12-step meetings has been an amazing experience, and also a little sad. There have been people, it's slow to come back, and so for me, connecting with others, that connection has been what has helped me grow. And I have missed that, and I love seeing it come back.
Because that's one of the tenets of 12-step meetings, is that they will happen. If it's a holiday, if it's no matter what, there's going to be a meeting. There will be a meeting. And to not have that in-person gathering, it did. But you're right. What happened was the globalization of normalizing our discussion around the subject of addiction and recovery. I mean, meeting people across the globe in a Zoom meeting because you're in the same recovery meeting, and that's beautiful.
I was thinking when you were talking earlier about the saint of the day, about the people in Ukraine in recovery right now trying to find a meeting. Gosh. And I think, and I'm grateful that there are organizations out there that are working toward helping folks with that. But that Zoom is a big part of that, the ability, or technology like Zoom, the ability to connect. And I can't imagine what those folks are going through, just trying to live their lives on a regular basis. And they were going to meetings in this town, a week ago, and the town is gone.
And their support, what they think, this is my support group.
My support group, yeah.
Right.
And there's phone meetings as well. Telephone,
Yes.
a lot, basically 24/7, you can find a telephone meeting if you can't find a Zoom.
Right. That there's, that there are opportunities to reach out, and that recovery occurs in community, and being able to be willing to take the step to reach out, but having a place to go to reach out. Again, availing yourself to the resources, finding what the resources are. But I think just talking about it, I really, kind of circling back to your question of, what do we do with addiction? And, the piece that I think we talk about recovery. I think we talk about recovery. I mean, I would love to see like a major motion picture about the beauty of recovery. Perhaps it doesn't make as much of an interesting story as the crash and burn, but, I think talking about the really the happily ever after, and it's not like it's all roses and daisies all the time. I mean, it's life. It's life, living life on life's term. And recovery teaches you how to do it, how to live life.
I was recently faced with the conundrum of when my children found out somebody else was dealing with addiction. They said, oh, well, this person's going to die because they are an alcoholic like so-and-so who died. I realized, this is because I wanted to shelter them, and this is what they knew about addiction. And so I reached out to a whole bunch of friends saying, y'all help me. Who are some people that in recovery like that that are great mentors, and they are. You can just search it, and there are people of all walks of life who are out there saying, I am in recovery, and this is the story, and we can normalize it. Which I do want to say something real quick about anonymity too, being the spiritual foundation of all of our principles and traditions. So can y'all please, Shane, or whoever wants to take it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I can speak for myself. I don't want to break anybody else's anonymity. And I think that's the beautiful piece of it. When I go to a meeting, I can just be Laura. I don't have to be Laura the professional, Laura the mother. Nobody knows anything else about my life but my name. And that frees me to be really kind of rigorously honest and open. And it's just very liberating for me.
There's a group that I go to that helps families and friends of people in recovery, and I think so many times about that group that there are a lot of people that I know really well in that group that I don't know their last name, and it's amazing that kind of thing exists. The other fantastic piece about anonymity that I learned a long time ago was when I'm in a meeting or really in any kind of experience, that if I can allow the person speaking to be anonymous, if I can think that I know all the history about that person. I know that they're divorced and what happened to them in their life, and if they're speaking, if they're sharing, if I can put all that aside and listen to them just as another recovering person, that I find I get amazing experiences through that. So two sides of anonymity to me. One, it's important that we protect the anonymity of people, and because that's how the process works. Like, I can't be a representative of a specific 12-step program in public, because what happens if I mess up and somebody says, oh, that guy's a member of such and such, and look what he did. So that part of anonymity is important.
And I mean, that's, to me, like, that is holy ground. And that's what a good example of who am I in life. I'm this person. I am this person experiencing this experience right here, right now. It doesn't matter what I was experiencing a minute before or what I want to try to control that I'm going to experience in the minute to follow. And to accept each other in that moment. I mean, it is sharing the love of God with each other, to see each other just as we are.
Non-judgmentally and accepting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Can you give me some age-appropriate examples of talking to children about addiction and words and phrases to use, or even with adults too, people who don't know where I'm coming from?
Okay. Well, I think, going to kids first, I think remembering that kids are emotional sponges, and they pick up sort of the vibrations that are happening in a household. And if there is active addiction, there's going to be some disruptive vibrations. There's going to be a lot of chaos, and it's going to be confusing. The other thing that kids need is they need to feel safe. They need to know, because, they're little beings. They can't take care of themselves on their own. And they are typically very fearful that something's going to happen to mom or dad, and they're not going to be safe. So I think part of it is, then the other piece that happens with addiction is that there can be all this chaos that's ensued. Kids feel that, see that, and nobody is saying anything. Like, why is parent A or B acting so crazy? And being able to give them an understanding, kind of age appropriate, they've got an illness. They've got an illness, and I think the other piece is that, and you're okay. The other piece that happens with addiction and with kids is somehow they take responsibility. That I think that might be a piece of control. Like, if I take responsibility for this, or if I feel like I'm at fault, I can control it. Newsflash, you can't. You're not responsible. So that's the other piece, to say that this is, that this is what's going on with your parent. This is not because of you. The other piece, I think, for anybody encountering addiction is being able to detach with love. And really what that means is you're still present, you're still loving, but you're protecting yourself from the chaos that can be caused by somebody else's suffering.
Sometimes we say in recovery, I detached with a chainsaw. Sometimes, and finding a balance where you can detach with love. I didn't know what that phrase meant, detach with love. Mm-hmm. If somebody was doing something that hurt me, especially in early recovery, I was like detaching, like, I'm not going to speak to you ever again, and learning that there is, I can hold space for that person while detaching. I can still feel love for that, whatever the situation is. But the situation is terrible, but I can feel love for the person.
And I think it ties in with that, and you're not responsible for it.
Yeah.
I think how, like what you're saying, Laura, I've even said to other people, you are making me angry. You are responsible for, so therefore you are responsible for all these emotions I'm feeling. And trying to say, no, I'm responsible for me. You're responsible for you. And I know that the 3 tenets of a dysfunctional family: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And we're not going to talk about it. We don't want to admit that it's happening, that it's there, and how reality distorting that is.
Absolutely.
I mean, we know you can be having a conversation with another human and say, something feels off. I don't know. Something's different. Something feels different. And you better believe children know at a very young age, something is off here. It's not how they're telling me it is, and then how that it can impact you throughout the rest of your life, right?
Yeah. So I mean, if you are witnessing something and it's not being explained to you as a child, if you're witnessing something, then you'll create your own distortions, your own reality, your own explanation of what it is. So I mean, I think as parents, it's a huge responsibility, and one that we're probably, speaking for myself, don't know that I was completely prepared for. I don't know how you prepare for it, but at any rate, I think the best thing you can do for your kids is to do well for yourself, to practice self-care, to make sure, have a place to go for yourself when you are feeling out of sorts. And so, for me, working a recovery program and practicing honesty, for yourself, not having to make everything okay. I think that's an important lesson in being able to see is when things aren't okay, what's the path to getting okay? And that, it eventually will be okay. One of the phrases I learned early on that was helpful to me in my recovery, in the end, it's going to be okay. If it's not okay, it's not the end.
Oh.
And so...
And asking for help is one of the hardest things that any of us ever do. As adults, surely, but as children, like asking for help, lots of times they're okay with it. They're like, "Mommy, I need help doing this." And, we somehow lose that along the way as we grow into adulthood. We're like, "I don't think I need to ask anybody for help. I can handle this. I can," and especially when you're dealing with addiction, ask for help. And there are lots of places to get help from. If you are in addiction or if you are dealing with somebody else's addiction, like, ask for help.
And again, the kind of where we started, the church is a place to go, can be a place to go. It took me a minute to get there. It took me, I dealt with it on my own for a long time, feeling like I knew about this. I have a lot of experience with this. I know how to handle this. And not true. And being the gift of being able to let other people help you.
We talk a lot about the 800-pound phone in recovery, like how hard it is to pick up that phone from the, like, we spend a lot of time these days with our phones in our hands, staring at them a lot, but actually dialing a number can be really, really hard to do. And just know that for me, when I actually dialed that number and asked somebody for help, that it was there, like people helped.
That's helped me with, if I'll be in a shame spiral and if I reach out to somebody and just say, I am feeling shame right now because shame hates sunlight. I think that's Brene Brown. I should give credit where credit's due. But, and to say, I know that I'm still tethered to a group of people, that I can feel this feeling. And it is so hard because what I have trained myself, I've adapted to, is to isolate, hide, don't let anybody know it's a problem, and nobody else can understand. And I think that's a big thing to newcomers, to everybody. Like, the first time you sit in a recovery room and you hear somebody else say something and you thought, nope, somebody else has a shared experience. Like, somebody else can understand what I am going through right here, right now, or what has happened to me. And even if they didn't have the same exact experience, they can understand a lot of the things around it and what we've done to communicate or to cope.
Hearing my story on someone else's lips is one of the most beautiful things.
Yeah, absolutely. And and then just in how that can sort of light you up in a response of healing, of and seeing her, hearing somebody who's farther down the road or has had more experience. And then also the other beautiful part is hearing somebody who is struggling new, and then you can see where you've come as well. I mean, that's the beautiful part of being in a meeting.
So I think, I mean, what we're saying is reach out. You are not alone. If you believe that you might possibly be struggling with a problem, or somebody you love might be struggling with a problem, please reach out. As a reminder, the Episcopal Recovery Ministry has a complete list of the 12-step groups for people struggling with addiction and those who love them at www.episcopalrecovery.org. And if you believe you or a loved one needs help, please do not hesitate to call the 24/7 hotline for SAMHSA. That's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and that's 1-800-662-HELP or 4357, 1-800-662-HELP. You can find the Episcopal Diocese of West Tennessee on Facebook, Instagram, and at EDWTN.org. And like we were saying, I would venture to, find a church. You could find a church on through that website and contact one of those churches, and they probably have a group there meeting already, and they'd love to see you grace their doors. You can listen to past podcasts or episodes of Faithfully Memphis on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please like and subscribe. Thank you so much, Shannon Tucker and Laura White, for being here today. I love sharing space with y'all and the work that you're doing in, I think, serving the community and in the world. Thank you very much. This is Maggie Schaumleffel for Faithfully Memphis. Until next time, stay safe and stay positive.